Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Capture Studio. Today we'll be taking an in-depth look at the import and export functionality in Capture Nexum. We will also be running a question and answer session towards the end of the webcast. We'll be taking any kinds of questions, but of course we will be giving priority to import and export related questions, as this is the main topic of today. But before we do that, I'm going to bring you up to date with some of the other recent developments we have going on. We are currently working on an update of Capture Nexum. This will be version 23.1. This has a number of improvements and enhancements. I'll mention a few of the most important ones, which are related to visualization. So one of the things we've done is we have balanced the colors for very strong intensities. So when you have a strong indigo or violet color, it no longer has the tendency to shift into magenta as it used to do before, but rather stays in the blue color region as it should. Another thing we've done is we have improved the rendering of apertures. They had a tendency to get rather dark as you zoomed away from fixtures before, and this is something we have improved now, so as you zoom out of the stage, it is no longer getting difficult to see small apertures or big apertures of lights that aren't as strong, like the decorative lights that are pretty common these days. We've also added a new default beam look for beam fixtures. So beam fixtures, they have the ability to project gobos, and they have sharpish edges, but they have usually a rather strong hotspot in the center. Previously, we used the regular profile look of the beam for beam fixtures, which gave an incorrect visualization. So with version 23.1, there is actually a better look to the beam fixtures. Well, for those that don't have a photometric profile as an IES for us to rely on. We are also going to be present at the MediaTek Africa trade show in South Africa. So this is the 19th to 21st of July in Johannesburg. So if you're in that region, please drop by and see us. We'll be at the Production Warehouses stand, which is G47. So if you want to meet us, that's a great opportunity. And finally, I would like to invite you all to the Capture user group on Facebook. This is called Capture Design and Visualization. It's not an official group run by us, but rather a user group, as I said. But we do pay attention to it. Occasionally we bring some answers, and it's great feedback for us as well, and a nice place for you to share pictures and ideas with each other. So let's move on and start with the main topic of the day, which is import and export. So Capture has two main types of import and export that we're going to be looking at. This is data and model import and export. We're going to start with taking a look at the type of import that we call data import. So what is data import? Well, data import is about anything that doesn't have to do with the 3D geometry and the models. So in essence, it's the fixture patch list. This is what we support at the moment anyway. So the primary file format for data import and export in Capture is CSV. CSV is short for comma-separated values, and it's a text format used to transfer information between softwares. I'm going to show you in a bit of detail here because I know it's a bit of a mystic topic to some, so this is a good opportunity to demystify what CSV files are about. So what I have open here is a text editor. This is my favorite one. It's called Sublime. there are other ones. You could be using Notepad on Windows or TextEdit on Mac OS. And what I'm going to do is create a simple example of some data to import into Capture. So imagine we have 3 fixtures, 1, 2, and 3. These could be source for 19 degree. It could be, I'll stick to source for, again, actually, another 19 degree, and then maybe on alpha spot 1500. These might be patched, so we might have the first one on DMX channel 1, the second on DMX channel 2, and the third one on DMX channel 3. This is now a basic patch that we could transfer into Capture, but there's one little detail that we want to add as well, and that is the first line that describes what these fields are in the file. So I started with what could be a unit number. Then we have the fixture type, followed by the patch. So what we've created here is, in fact, a CSV file. It has comma-separated values, which is what CSV stands for. It's got 1 line per fixture and a description line at the top. So let's save this to the desktop and let's call it 3fixtures.csv. So what I'll do next is I'll open Capture, where I have a blank project going. And I'm going to use the import data option in the file menu. I choose the CSV file that I just created, and up comes this user interface that lets me configure some aspects of the import. So to begin with, Capture suggests identifying fixtures by the unit, which sounds like a great idea. And if I scroll down a bit here, there's also the patch information that I want to get from the file, which we called patch in the file. There's one bit missing at this point now, though, and that is in order to add the fixtures to Capture, Capture needs to know what type of fixture they are. So we need to choose that fixture type column from the CSV file. At this point, we're ready to go, so I hit import. And what happens then is Capture needs some additional information about this thing here called source 419. So if I hit identify, I get essentially a library search window, which, by no coincidence, actually lists the fixture I want first. So I hit identify and continue as I'm ready to go. So results, 3 fixtures were added. If we zoom in a bit, we can see the 3 fixtures here, and they're here in the fixture tab as well, matching the data that we input in the CSV file. So at this point, it's also worth noting that CSV files are also easily edited in spreadsheet softwares, such as Excel, Numbers, or as the one I use is called LibreOffice, which is a free option. I need to give it a bit of help here and say we're using commas. And as I do that, we get the familiar spreadsheet view of the data. So for most people, it will be preferable to create any CSV file in a software like this, but I wanted to show you that this is in fact just a text file and it could be edited as a text file as well. So what we'll do next is we will make some changes in Capture and see what kind of data we can export from Capture. So we have these fixtures in here now. We could add some channel values, let's say channel 10, 11, and 12, and maybe even some circuit numbers. So we can also get these CSV files out of Capture, and the way we do that is by using the export data option. And I did not intend to open AutoCAD, sorry about that. Oh, AutoCAD crashed. I'm not sorry about that. Anyway, so we'll use the export data feature from the file menu. I'll create a new file, 3fixtures revised. If I could type. There we go. I leave the options at default at the moment. No, thank you, Autodesk. And we have 3 fixtures revised on the desktop, which, if I open it, to begin with, I need to make an adjustment here. Capture export CSV files using tab to separate the values. It is actually pretty common to use other characters than the comma sign to separate values, such as tab, semicolon, and in some cases also just spaces. And for some reason, I'm also going to change the character set. So if you get a question about character sets for CSV files from Capture, then you want to use the UTF-8 option, which is a very good option in our opinion. So now we've got the data that we exported from Capture open in the spreadsheet. You can see it is similar to what we had when we created the data, but there are more columns present now, like unit, circuit, channel, patch, all the way down, including XYZ positions. So what I want to show you now is another aspect of data import, which is modifying fixtures already in the project. So what we can do here now, imagine we changed our mind on the circuit numbering here. The electricians have changed things. And the circuit numbers should now be 201, 203, 204 instead. So I'll save and replace the file. Yes, CSV format, please. I go back into Capture. I go back to import data. The updated revised CSV file that I just changed, which is apparently locked by LibreOffice because it's still open in here. So I will shut my spreadsheet application down, go back to import data, and the revised document. Now, as we can see in this window now, there are a lot more options pre-configured. And the reason is because this was a Capture export to begin with. We now have a lot more fields that are matching on import. So there's no need to do anything here. I can simply proceed. Capture understands its own file. I get notified that 3 fixtures were updated. And now we can see the new circuit values in here as I had changed them in the spreadsheet application. There is, there's one more important thing I want to mention in this context, and that is the fixture identification scheme. It is important that on import, Capture is able to uniquely identify fixtures in the project with data in the data file. And it needs there to be a column in the data file that that links the data to the fixtures in the project. So in the data file, we have the unit column here, and these numbers need to match fixtures in the project. Otherwise, Capture will not understand which fixture to associate the new data with. All right. So that's it for the most straightforward data import and export scenarios. There's a few ones more I want to mention. There is on export data, there is an option. I need to give the file name first, so I'll simply write fixtures for light right. There is an option in the CSV export to adjust the export for light right. And what happens when we do that is that the column names appear slightly different than the column names do in Capture's standard CSV export. So if I open these files side by side, you can see that when it's adapted for light right, we have slightly different column names and even column formatting. So the patch information, for instance, is in number/number notation, whereas Capture's native format is universe name .channel number. I also believe the XYZ position information is not included in light right, but the pan and tilt information is. So I just wanted to show you that if you're a light right user, that will make your life a lot easier. And finally, I want to touch also the last option in the data export, which is the HOG4 format, where there is the XML for HOG4 option. Now, when you are exporting patch to the HOG, there are a few things you should keep in mind. To begin with, when we do this, we have to name the fixtures types used in the patch file to the HOG, and these names have to match the fixtures in your HOG library. So our advice is have your HOG open, check the exact names of the fixtures you need, or either that exist in the library, or if you have created ones of your own, which is another option. So for instance, for this dimmer here, you might prefer, and I may be way out here in the naming, but just to give you an example. Okay, that's not actually a fixture. Right, there we go. Once we have named the fixture, I hit continue, and there's this file here, which I can now import in the HOG. I'll open it briefly. This is an XML file, so it looks different from the CSV file, but you can still see the information in here. It says generic dimmer on DMX protocol, DP1, universe 1, address 1, and so on. So now I think we've covered all aspects of data import and export, and I'm ready to move on to the more model-oriented import and export, at which point I was just checking in case there were any questions already, but there weren't. So we will move on to the model import and export them. And for the purpose of this, I have, as soon as SketchUp opens, a bit of scenery drawn in SketchUp. And this is the scenery also used in the demo project file called Chateau, which is available on our website since the release of Capture Nexum. So we have some pieces of scenery here that we would like to import into Capture. The way we go about this in Capture, let me just start a blank project first, is we use the import model feature in the file menu. We choose the SketchUp file, and there's this harangue of text flashing by. If you're lucky, this just disappears. If not, you should read it. We'll do that in a moment, but for now I'll just hit continue and proceed. In this window that opens now, you have a chance of viewing the file you just selected, the SketchUp file in this case. And in many cases, you will simply use the drag and drop button here and drag it into your design, and often you might place it at the original position of the design you had, but you can place it on other locations as well. So that is the basic import workflow, and you will notice now that we have a number of individually selectable objects here in Capture now. So what I want to go through is how these objects are, let's say, arranged. And the way this happens depends a lot on how the file was drawn in SketchUp or Cinema or AutoCAD or wherever you're importing from. So in this case, each piece of scenery here is actually a group, as we can see in the entity info here as well. And if we zoom in a bit, you can see that there are some different materials applied to these pieces of scenery as well. So there are in total 8 materials in this project, and they're applied to various parts of this scenery. So what happens in Capture when you import is that any item with a specific material becomes a separate object. And the reason for this is that this allows you to change the material of this piece or replace it. And if I expand the materials browser here, you can see the materials we have imported from SketchUp. I am a little bit unprepared here, but yes, these are the materials that we just imported. So there are a few other things that will cause objects to become individually selectable after an import, and that is if you have used components in AutoCAD, if you have used solid entities in AutoCAD. But in general, it is better for the performance of Capture if objects are as big as possible. So if after an import you have thousands of objects, this can actually affect the visualization negatively. So that's one of the reasons Capture tries to merge things as much as possible. So, excuse me for a moment. Yes. Let's go back to this import window again and talk about the things I skipped previously. So on import here, there's an amount of text scrolling by with information about the import, and occasionally there will be some errors. And that's the reason this window is not closing automatically. In fact, I'm being instructed to please review the errors before I continue. And in this case, I'm getting an error. It says, model contains two-sided material applications where only the front face material will be imported. So SketchUp supports the concept of having one material on one side of an object and another material on the other side of, well, the plane, actually, the polygon. Capture doesn't support this, so Capture needs to choose one of them. And in SketchUp, there's a concept of a front-facing polygon, and that is the side of the polygon from which we use the material. If you've drawn a lot or a fair amount in SketchUp, this is a concept you're aware of and you understand how it works. So if you get these errors, take a moment to review what you imported. If it looks all right, you don't have a problem. Normally, these errors are quite detailed, and if nothing looks wrong after the import, there is nothing to worry about, so you could proceed. So another thing I did in here is I used the View menu and I shifted to the Live mode, which by default has a nice ambient setting, so it's easier to inspect the materials of a project during the import process. You can, of course, switch to other views here. We had wireframe before. We can swing to top and use all the regular excuse me, options that we're used to. This is useful if you're actually importing from a Capture file, where you could even switch to the plot mode and get fixture information during the import process. So let's shift our attention down to the right corner of this view, where we have two options. The first one is called Include Layers. As the name implied, this decides which layers are included during the import. And normally this is set to referenced, which means that only layers used by the objects you import gets transferred. There is an option for all as well, which means you will get all the layers from the file regardless of whether they are in use or not. You might have a template Capture file or AutoCAD file or whatever with a nice set of layers that you want to use. So this is the way of getting all those layers into your design. Finally, there's a field called Drawing Unit, which is disabled at the moment. The reason for that is that SketchUp is scale aware. If I take a measure in SketchUp, I know whether it's in feet or meters or millimeters. This is not the case with the other import formats Capture supports. And for that reason, it's disabled where we are importing from SketchUp. But I have another file we could take a look at, which is a Vectorworks DWG export. It's called Vectorworks bars. It's got a bar of 8 fixtures. Looks like this. Now you can see the drawing unit property is in fact enabled, and Capture has guessed 25.4 millimeters, which is an inch. If I select these objects and drag them into my project, they have a reasonable size. I can tell this by the grid, because the grid has a 1 meter spacing, and that is, so this bar is around 6 meters long, which is what it should be. If you should get this wrong during import, you have the option of changing the drawing unit after the import. The way you do that is by going to the selected items properties and finding the drawing unit property. If I had done something wrong here and they came in super tiny, it may be that the drawing unit should have been in millimeters or some other unit. So you can preview the size in the import window, but you can also change it afterwards. It's not game over once they're imported. This is useful to know. Excuse me. So now we're going to take a look at some advanced concepts of combining data and model import. So in this case here, I've imported a bar of fixtures from Vectorworks by way of DWG files, which means I get these nice 3D models of the fixtures, but they are only 3D shapes. Capture doesn't understand their fixtures, there's no patch information, and there's no way for me to light them right now. So there are two options available to me. First, there's the general option of replacing these imported fixtures or shapes with actual fixtures. And one way of doing that is selecting a fixture, going to the library. What we have here is an etc profile, and it's a source 4, 19 degrees. I grab it, I drag and drop it on top of the imported object, and it gets replaced with a capture fixture. Another nice shortcut, if you use this method, is the function that specifically selects all objects by drawing block name. So what is that? Well, drawing block name is a property that you will find on imported objects. I'm just checking that you can actually see it. And it relates to the name of the drawing block from an AutoCAD file or a component from a SketchUp file, and possibly even a group from an OBJ file. And in this case, all of these source 4s, they have the same drawing block name because it is a block in AutoCAD. So I can use this shortcut function and have all of the source 4s selected in a go. Then I can grab a source 4 in the library and replace them all in a go. And then I could do the same thing with this fixture here, which would appear to be a Mac Aura. So I would go to the fixture library, it's a Martin moving head, Mac Aura. I'll select all the fixtures of the same drawing block and drag and drop to replace them. Of course, now we only have fixtures, they're not patched. They are in the right location, but there is still some work to be done. But if this file came from Vectorworks, if it was exported from Vectorworks, then there is another way of getting the last bit of the puzzle here. And that is by, in Vectorworks, using the function called export instrument data. What this function does in Vectorworks is it gives you a CSV file, which we now know how that works. And in this particular case, it looks like this. So it's got a list of 8 fixtures with some information for them. And this is something we've seen before, so I'll show you how to make use of it. I go to the File menu, I say Import Data. I have the Vectorworks bars.txt, so these files actually come out as txt text files. I choose Open. Now Capture does some magic here. To begin with, it understands the column names given by Vectorworks, so we don't actually have to bother with configuring anything manually in here. But it also sets up this drawing name property and matches it to a column in the file called __UID. This is the last column, so it's a bit difficult to show, but it is the last column that comes through in the CSV file. And the nice thing is that this piece of text is also preserved in the imported objects. So if I hit import here now, and I clarify the type of fixtures intended, source 4, Mac Aura, Mac Aura, identify, continue. Then what happens is Capture has now been able to identify these imported objects and replace them with the correct library fixture and assign the other information that was part of the CSV file, such as the circuit information, the patch information, and so on. So this is part of the import workflow for Vectorworks, as we call it, since you do need to have Vectorworks to export the DWG and the CSV file. But of course, this functionality works regardless of whether the data comes from Vectorworks or not. So you could have a data file structured this way coming in from, well, simply AutoCAD or any other CAD software, and use this approach to mass replace the fixtures in that scenario as well. So the only function remaining that I could show you is export data. This is not a function that comes with a lot of options at all, actually. So I'll simply export, export model, of course. So imported fixtures, and this exports a DWG or a DXF file. You have the option of filtering the export down to a layer set or simply the selected objects. And you get a DWG file, which I'll just open it briefly in AutoCAD, given that it doesn't crash again, to show you what that looks like. It's extremely straightforward. The reason I do this, I want to show you that what Capture exports at this point is the 3D geometry, which means we are not getting any kind of information about... This isn't working very well, is it? I think we've been visited by the demo devil. So something is... sorry, I'm just confusing myself with AutoCAD. I have to actually open the file as well. That helps. Yeah. So here we have the file as it was exported from Capture. But as I said, there's no plot-related information here like patch information or channel numbers or anything of that type. So this is something we may be looking into the future, but is simply not possible at this point. So that concludes everything I wanted to show you related to import and export and Capture. If you have questions or requests on other things that we could be showing you here, please feel free to leave a comment in the video field here, and I'll try to either answer them here or maybe next time we could have a look at it. So let's see if we have any questions that we should answer. And we have a first question here. Is there a reason why you guys prefer to have widgets active on all windows by default rather than having them inactive and activating them as an option? They get in the way, yes. The reason we prefer to have them on by default is what's called discoverability. Finding the smoke and camera widgets is very important, especially if you want to adjust the smoke level or understand how to patch cameras. And we believe it is at that point when you're looking and trying to figure out how it works, it is more difficult to understand that first you need to enable widgets. So we leave them on by default and let people switch them off if they are annoying and getting in the way. And next question is, how do I get the software? And that's a very good question. You go to our website, capturesweden.com, and our download page, which you should find a big link for in the top navigation menu on our website. You need to input your name and email and hit download for either the Mac or Windows version, after which you will get an email with the file to download. So that would seem to be the only questions for today. So thanks everyone for watching now or later on, as this video will still be here. Thank you for your time.